Welcome to KELOLAND in Session. I'm Maddie Paul. As lawmakers spend the next 38 days in Pierre drafting and debating proposed laws, KELOLAND in Session will bring you the latest weekly updates on the 2026 South Dakota legislative session. Week 2 of the legislative session is headlining with a dispute. This all started last week when the House Education Committee was meeting for the first time of the year and dealt with a dispute over the seating spots designated for some of its 15 members.
We had everybody come out of the room, and we took them in the room next door to deal with the issue out of sight of the public, because what was going on when I walked in was just totally unacceptable. I mean, we're here to do a job, to be statesmen, and to act as professionals. And I just explained to the members, if you have a problem with anything that a chair is doing, the correct way to handle it is to either try to change the rules during that process or come in that day and conduct yourselves as professionals that day and ask for folks to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk it through at a later time. But the way you definitely don't do it is try to disrupt the proceedings of the House of Representatives. So
during the legislative leadership news conferences, we asked about that, and Scott Odenbach, he's the House Republican Majority Leader from Spearfish. He provided some details, and he was actually in the room when all of this was going on. He's not on the committee, but he was there for another reason, and so he saw it all happen, and he told us what. He didn't name any names, but he told us what happened and let us figure it out from there.
Odenbach said the committee members left the room and returned about 15 minutes later. On Tuesday, House Speaker John Hanson shuffled 5 lawmakers' committee assignments. Hanson provided a statement to KELOLAND News on Wednesday saying, quote, "As Speaker of the House, I am responsible for maintaining order and ensuring the legislature can conduct the people's business. I cannot allow any member to disrupt official proceedings over a seating assignment." I asked Bob Mercer more about this situation.
Speaker John Hanson announced on Tuesday afternoon that he was reassigning one of those committee members, Phil Jensen from Rapid City. And Phil, he's a longtime legislator. He didn't like where he was being seated and spoke up, and consequently he was removed and replaced on the committee. 2 of the legislators who got moved this week were also House members, but they were moved for a different reason. Liz May, she's a Republican from Kyle, and she had a 4-wheeler crash back in December, put her in the hospital, brain bleed. You know, she just made it back this week for the first time, and she was assigned to the Appropriations Committee. Well, the Appropriations Committee is very, very busy this year, especially given the revenue difficulties we're facing, and so to make it a little easier for her, the House leadership decided they would shuffle her over to another set of committees and then replace her on appropriations with Julie Auk, a Republican from Yankton. And so there's that. So that kind of thing happens. One of the senators is missing. He's in the hospital in Sioux Falls, Arch Beal. And so they're filling in for him in the Senate temporarily in the hopes that he'll be back. But a discipline issue like this, such as with Phil Jensen, that's a whole nother matter. And, we haven't seen something like that since, probably 2 or 3 years ago when Julie Freimuller, a senator from Custer, or from the Black Hills, Rapid City area, she was eventually censured by the Senate over some of her behavior, what she shared in a discussion with a legislative aide. So there's discipline, and then there's medicine or medical.
Now, when Odenbach was asked about his reaction to Hanson reassigning those seats, here's what he had to say.
there's a process that we follow here. If somebody's unhappy with how a committee's being run or how a seating chart is set up, our rules govern that, and I have told all the members of the House that we are going to, it's all we really can do is abide by the rules, and when we have a member that tries to act outside of those rules, then there has to be some consequences to say, this is how it's going to be in the House of Representatives.
I did ask Bob Mercer if this type of dispute and shuffle in seating is unusual for the legislative session, or if it could change the trajectory of its actions. And here's what Bob had to say.
Majority Leader Odenbach said he's actually glad this happened now rather than later in session, because he said you've got different candidates running for governor, both in the legislature and the governor himself running for governor, and they're all competing against each other. And he said some of that may be spilling into this too, but he just said it's better to get it out here now and deal with it now, and then hope the rest of the session goes well.
Still to come on KELOLAND in Session, we're going to talk about debated policies. We're hearing about lawmakers' reactions to two bills concerning taxes and why they failed to advance in the legislative session.
These are big problems that require very complex solutions.
Stay with us. You're watching KELOLAND in Session. Welcome back to KELOLAND in Session. A plan to replace a portion of your property taxes with a higher sales tax is being discussed in Pierre. The plan would let counties give up their share of property taxes in exchange for a half-cent sales tax. On Tuesday, at least one Minnehaha County commissioner went on the record saying he would like to know more about the governor's plan. Tom Hansen reports.
Governor Larry Roden laid out his proposal during his State of the State address and later talked about it at a press conference.
It's not a mandate, it's a choice for the people in each of the counties. They can replace property taxes for homeowners with a half-cent sales tax if it makes sense for their community.
Roden calls it a common sense trade and says many counties, especially those with tourism, would benefit. At today's Minnehaha County Commission meeting, Commissioner Joel Kipley said he sees the pros and the cons of the governor's proposal, and he can understand why some counties might like the idea of a sales tax instead, and why others won't favor the proposal.
This is just me stating publicly I'd welcome engagement from the governor's office or from the administration in any way.
Kipley says he would like the governor's office to walk the commission through how this would be implemented.
Kind of selling us on this idea, because I guess I'm willing to be sold, but I also have my own reservations. So I think there's some duty upon the state, if they want the counties to carry out this property tax relief, they should kind of sit down with us and walk us through the mechanics of that.
Kipley says counties will need to understand the fine print of what's in it for them and their taxpayers. And out of all the bills being introduced this week, Bob Mercer told me that there's hundreds more drafts up for debate now compared to last year.
They're still continuing to weed through all of the property tax proposals, and we probably haven't seen half of them at this point. One of the Republican leaders today said that LRC, the legislature's professional nonpartisan staff, that office has roughly 1,000 bill drafts still waiting to come, and not just all on property taxes, but that's a huge number. That's a huge number at this point. The other thing that's coming up, legislators can introduce unlimited number of bills up until Thursday of next week, and then after that, they're limited to 3 bills until the following Wednesday to introduce. But so if there are 1,000 bill drafts out there, if even half of those would come in, we would be seeing a far higher number of bills this year than usual. Most years we see 250 to 275 bills in each chamber. And this, we could be, 100, 200, 300 over that.
The first of several property tax proposals was up for debate on Wednesday in Pierre. However, this bill failed to advance. Senate Bill 58 sought to reduce property tax mill levies to zero. SB 58 was shut down unanimously. Digital reporter Michael Dorn listened into the meeting and explains what was said between lawmakers.
Would have reduced those mill levies to zeros and kind of set up some teams to work on a property tax reform that they would have a deadline to kind of meet. This bill failed mainly because lawmakers didn't like going in without a plan, it seemed. It very much seemed like they wanted a concrete plan, not just some people to form a group and come up with a plan, but a concrete plan that they could put into action that would have tangible results is what it seemed.
The committee also debated on a bill to tax gold found in South Dakota. This was another bill that failed to advance. Senate Bill 7 sought to modify the tax rate and tax distributions for gold served in the state and to create a new fund for rural water infrastructure projects. It was unanimously voted against, and Michael Dorn explains why.
There was quite a bit of discussion here, mostly in opposition to this bill is what we heard. Didn't hear too much from lawmakers here on this bill, but from the community and from all the people that showed up, it was a pretty resounding no, I feel, at least in terms of proponents and opponents here. What we saw there was the proponents were arguing that this would be a slight increase on the tax that would be split between the general fund and a new fund that would be related to rural water systems, and we'd have some funds going to that, while the gold companies argued that that was an unfair tax and no one gets taxed like this, and it would be an unfair tax on them, and that would be an unfair burden on them.
Up next, Governor Roden has recommended a $1.88 billion budget for the South Dakota Department of Social Services next year. DSS Secretary Matt Althoff went before the legislature's Joint Committee on Appropriations on Wednesday to explain some of those numbers.
The point that really came across from Social Services Secretary Matt Althoff during his hearing the other day was that his department is not asking for the new money because they just want more new money.
Please understand, committee members, you get it, but the federal government made essentially every one of these decisions for us. That's what I'm really trying to respectfully put before you. This is not a department sort of driven request for additional monies. If I could just impart that as a take home in all these.
The federal government, he says, has forced them into this in terms of the Congress passed the One Big Beautiful Bill. Well, that cut $5 million for SNAP administration, Supplemental Nutrition Program administration. Another thing that happened is just because of the economy, because South Dakota's economy has been relatively better than other states, what's known as the Medicaid matching rate, the state government's share of that went up, and it's up to 49 and some odd cents for every $100 now. Federal government pays the other half of that, or other part of that, but it's now, it's nearly half and half, and that's gone up simply because our state did better economically than other states had. So there was that, and the Department of Human Services also took a roughly $5.5 million haircut, if you will, where it has to come up with additional money for Medicaid, again, because of the FMAP.
Still to come on KELOLAND in session, we're going to continue adding the bill proposals that KELOLAND News covered throughout the week. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to KELOLAND in session. People in South Dakota and nationwide increasingly fall victim to fraud schemes. There's a few regulations about cryptocurrency transactions in South Dakota. Senator Steve Kolbeck introduced the legislation to target this problem under Senate Bill 98, and he's using the AARP's help.
So this summer we had some conversations with the AARP, and we found out that there's a lot of fraud targeted at elderly people that have to do with these cryptocurrency machines. They could be a BTM or a cryptocurrency. So we're just trying to put some bumpers around that and try to actually help prevent some fraud of elderly folks.
What would happen out of this legislation is if you were scammed, the legislation calls for the person who owns the cryptocurrency terminal to reimburse you. And so that's going to, we'll see what happens with it legislatively. But that's the extent that this could go.
In September, Sioux Falls police announced a woman lost $200,000 in a scam involving Bitcoin, while another person lost $181,000 in a scam announced in October. Jordan DeSmit takes us through Senate Bill 98.
Scams involving cryptocurrency machines have been in the news in recent months. Captain Adam Ziska of the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office says the chances of you getting that money back are slim to none.
Once you put the money in to an account or you're directed to put that money in, it's gone. It's secured and encrypted, and so there's no way to recover that money. It's anonymous, and the scammers know that it can't be traced back to them easily.
The crime has also caught the attention of lawmakers in Pierre. Up for discussion this session is SB 98, which attempts to prevent virtual currency kiosk fraud. Republican Senator Steve Kolbeck of Brandon is a prime sponsor of the bill, which has bipartisan support.
So this summer we had some conversations with the AARP, and we found out that there's a lot of fraud targeted at elderly people that have to do with these cryptocurrency machines.
If passed, SB 98 would call for virtual currency kiosk owners in South Dakota to have a state license, file annual reports, and provide users receipts and give refunds if the user is a victim of fraud. The bill would also limit transactions to $1,000 per day or $10,000 per month. However, Kolbeck says SB 98 is not an anti-cryptocurrency bill.
If you want to do that, buy, sell, trade, that is not what it is. It's just there's some bad players out there, and we want to make sure that we put some bumpers around them before people start stuffing cash into these machines. Try to get them a receipt. Try to make sure that it's not fraud and an accurate and legitimate exchange.
Now, Ziska says that scammers will spoof the sheriff's office or police department's phone numbers to make it look like a legitimate call. He says the sheriff's office will never collect payment for a warrant over the phone. If you want to read SB 98 in its entirety, visit this link under our story on KELOLAND.com. Now let's switch over to other legislation discussed this week in Pierre. A bill that would allow varsity athletes to receive class credit for participating in sports has passed 8-7 on Wednesday in the House Education Committee. Proponents say this will allow athletes to focus on taking more classes by swapping PE credits with a varsity level sport. Opponents are worried about changing education standards and graduation requirements, as well as possibly paying coaches for teaching positions. To read more on this bill, visit KELOLAND.com original by Gracie Terrell right now. In a bill that appropriates funds to the State Department of Health to be used for a rural health transformation program has passed through appropriations. The bill faced some pushback on its amendments, with lawmakers debating on how the federal dollars will roll out. Digital reporter Marissa Bronkhorst was in Pierre to listen to that debate. That story is online right now. A bill that would have allowed voters to remove any sitting county commissioner through a special election failed to make its way through the committee on Thursday. House Bill 1004 would have allowed any commissioner to be removed if a petition with 5% of registered voters in the county is submitted, triggering a special election for that commissioner. The committee voted 9-3 with one excuse to kill the bill. To see what lawmakers had to say, check out this KELOLAND.com original by Michael Dorn on our website right now. And finally, the Senate Commerce and Energy Committee met Wednesday to discuss 3 bills, including one that would have sped up the permit application process for energy facilities. Senate Bill 25 serves 2 main purposes: removing a required 6-month pre-notice and making local review committees optional. The bill passed 5-1, with 3 senators excused. For more on this bill, check out this KELOLAND.com original by Michael Dorn online right now. We're going to take a quick break, but stay with KELOLAND in session to hear about policy and debates for the week ahead. We'll be right back. Welcome back to KELOLAND in session. The 2026 session calendar gives us some insight into key dates for this week's recap. There was no legislative session on Monday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a state and federal holiday. On Tuesday, the governor had a deadline to file any executive reorganization orders, and there was a joint memorial service on Thursday for lawmakers who died in the past year. To find more key dates and resources, find this story by our Capitol Bureau reporter Bob Mercer on our website on KELOLAND.com. And as we're wrapping up this week's episode of KELOLAND in session, let's hear from Bob Mercer about what we can expect for the week ahead.
Bill drafts. And so that would be the big thing. There's a bill in that would give data centers a 50-year sales tax exemption if they met certain conditions. And that hasn't been set for a hearing yet, but the House State Affairs will hear that. That could be a big deal. And that's one of the big issues of this session, besides property taxes, is data centers. What's South Dakota going to do about them? Another issue that has to be developed yet is what to do about Future Fund, which is the governor controls what's known as the Future Fund, and basically what it is as part of your unemployment taxes or part of the unemployment taxes that businesses pay, a small sliver goes into what's known as the Future Fund. And in recent years, as Governor Noem gave a Future Fund grant to a shooting range in Rapid City to build that. And there were also some other grants to other projects that have been controversial. And so the legislature wants to rein it in. Governor Roden issued an executive order a week ago where he put limits on himself on what he would do, but that the next governor could come in and not adhere to those limits. And so the legislation that's been proposed would have it go to the Board of Economic Development. Well, the flaw in that is that the governor appoints the members of the Board of Economic Development, so he could still have his own way, or he or she could have their own way on those grants. So they're struggling to find a solution to that.
And that is our time for KELOLAND In Session this week. This show airs every Friday at 3 o'clock Central Time during the South Dakota legislative session. So join us every Friday night right here on KELOLAND Plus for a recap of what happened in the week and a preview for the week ahead. Until next time, have a great day, everyone.